Hi, welcome. We're going to give people a couple minutes to join the Zoom, and then we'll be getting started shortly. Welcome to everyone joining. We're going to give a minute or two for others to join, and then we're going to get started. And Beth, I see you in the chat. Great that you guys can join. Again, welcome to everyone who's joined. We're going to give just another minute for others to join. All right, well, I think we're going to get started. So, welcome everyone who's joined us today. This is the third in a series of three webinars that Bellwether has organized to really reflect on New Orleans and the evolution of education and pathway and workforce innovations over the last 20 years. Tomorrow is considered by many, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, based on when it made landfall. And the hurricane and catastrophe really forced an involuntary reinvention of New Orleans for many of its systems, including its education systems. And so the past 20 years, we've seen an experiment in a system of charter school governance. And of course, there should be and has been a lot of reflection on that. But what brings us together today is really a reflection on the fact there's also been an incredible amount of innovation around post-secondary and career pathways that I think are really important to discuss and celebrate. And so I think more of this panel may reflect a little bit on the last 20 years, but I think it's also going to very much reflect on the present and the future, which I think there's a lot to be hopeful about. And I think we believe this has never been more timely. We've seen a progressive blurring between K-12 post-secondary workforce in deference to jobs for the future and their big blur concept. We've seen rising dissatisfaction with conventional post-secondary pathways. Some of that stems from concerns over cost and ROI, and in other cases from the reality that there are a lot of people who are looking for a system of post-secondary pathways, both education and workforce, that's not one-time and linear, but cyclical and allows people to make short-term choices that does not deny them long-term opportunities. And we are seeing an incredible proliferation of new and exciting pathways. At the very time, we're also transitioning our conversation to the concept of skills as the real currency of value that people are trying to gain and employers are looking for as part of post-secondary pathways. And then last, there's been and continues to be a big shift in what government is funding as part of this work. So in terms of this webinar, I'm doing a very brief intro, and then we're going to hear from our three amazing panelists. We have a set of curated questions that we're going to discuss, and then we're going to save a lot of time to open it up to the audience. I will just start very quickly by introducing myself and Bellwether. So Bellwether is a nonprofit. We envision a future where all young people have access to excellent education and live lives filled with opportunity. We provide support and strategic advising, academic and program design, policy analysis and development, measurement and evaluation, and research and field building. And we work across early childhood, K-12, post-secondary workforce, and with clients that range from district charter and private school systems that are serving systemically marginalized communities to nonprofit program providers and intermediaries, funders, research and advocacy organizations, institutions of higher education, and local, state, and federal government. I think I said this at the beginning, maybe I didn't. My name's Alex Cortez. I'm a partner at Bellwether, and I'm a native New Orleanian. So this panel means a lot to me, and I'm certainly probably not the only person who's sitting with feelings about it. I'm going to turn over to our panelists to introduce themselves and talk about their work. We encourage you to put questions in the chat or the question piece, and we will get to those in the latter half of the webinar. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. Humbled to be part of this conversation and appreciative to share this time with all of you, Kate, Claire, as part of this sort of, career connected learning ecosystem here in New Orleans. So I'll take a shot at going first. So I lead Uncommon Construction. We're a nonprofit workforce development organization. We host an apprenticeship program for high school students. It's a lowercase a apprenticeship program. So this is not a registered apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship. This is a work-based learning experience in an alternative learning environment. So what we do is use the build process to empower young people with the skills, network, experience, and resources to lead the workforce after high school or college. We do that through the work-based learning experience that I described, where young people from different schools across the city apply to join a diverse team of their peers. They earn hourly pay above minimum wage and school credit for building a house or another project together. And then with the revenue from those projects, we match their earnings 50 cents on the dollar with what we call an equity award scholarship that they can use for further education and career opportunities. In a lot of ways, we operate just like a regular residential construction company, a real estate development company. We return blighted properties to commerce. We hire teenagers as seasonal labor as part of our integrated training programs, which have a really unique approach where we prioritize creating an environment that emphasizes the development and demonstration of soft skills or durable skills, or 21st century skills. We know that the technical skills will come through 100, 120 hours of on-the-job technical training each semester. And what really drives all of that forward is accentuating the positive, enhancing the experience with these demonstrable soft skills that are just really, really observable in a construction-based learning environment. So we're starting our 11th school year. In that time, we've created more than 550 positions for high school students who've collectively earned over $600,000 in pay and scholarships generated through the crucible of the experience of working on these projects together. And then also in the process, we've directly engaged thousands of industry professionals in an effort to better understand and prepare them to receive a younger and more diverse workforce. There's sort of two sides to the intersection that intersect in the learning environment of our job sites. You can go to the next slide, and I'll kind of show you what it looks like. So if you think about a young person like Josh, who's featured in this progression, he shows up on his first day on an Uncommon construction site, and there's nothing. And together with the rest of his team of students from different schools and neighborhoods from across the city, they build and stand all the walls to a house in a day. And they leave at the end of the day with a three-dimensional structure behind them, but also an unparalleled sense of accomplishment. They come back the following weekends and the following Saturdays and for after-school professional development sessions, adding value and progress to the projects that they're building together. So the next Saturday, they're raising the roof, and the Saturday after that is sheathing, and the one after that is windows and doors, and then siding and trim and paint prep. Being critically involved in a majority of the phases of construction for one of these houses in our community. So then, by the end of semester promotion ceremony, Josh and Jador and Makeda and any other young person who's been a part of that experience can give a tour of the finished home that they built with granite countertops and hardwood floors before it's listed for sale, most commonly in the open market. And then someone in our community is making the single largest transaction of their lives in the form of a 30-year mortgage as an investment in the young people. So it all happens in this immersive environment that emphasizes these four soft skills, durable skills that are part of the Youth Force NOLA, NOCC, and other ecosystem that we all sort of share. And we emphasize problem solving, professional attitude, teamwork ethic, and time management. So every month with your paycheck, you're getting a performance evaluation, assessing, evaluating, coaching you on whether and how you're prepared to meet the rigorous expectations in your future workplace environment. And so then, Josh graduates and he takes a job potentially with one of our industry partners where he got promotions and continued his education studying general carpentry at the community college, while simultaneously starting his own business where he now works full time, and we hire him as a subcontractor for our projects that we build with our cohorts of young people. And he's often the first to sign up for our recruitment events so that he can source his first employees from the upcoming classes of Uncommon Construction Apprentices. So there's a lot more to share and explore about the model, the learning, earning business model that we have at Uncommon. We love when we share our young people with Youth Force NOLA and with NOCC. And when we have those like dual and triple experiences across these different environments. So I'm excited to hear from them. And then I think we'll talk about how we're all integrated together too, right? So thanks for that. That's a big overview of Uncommon Construction.
Thank you, Aaron. And I think that was a great segue to Claire.
So thank you, Alex, Kate, Aaron, and all the people who have joined us. It's a privilege to be here and be able to talk about this work that represents the hard work and collaboration of so many community members and New Orleanians who are not a white woman from somewhere else, who moved here in 2007. But I remember being the first principal partner, or one of the first, to send students to Uncommon Construction, and one of the first partners with Youth Force NOLA. So it's really exciting to sort of think about the evolution of the Career Center, which is the youngest of the three of us. We're in our 7th year of programming. So our vision at New Orleans Career Center is to ensure that all graduates have the power to shape their future and the future of New Orleans. So this is very much a space that is place-based in our mission. We're an independent nonprofit. We're the hub to equip young adults in New Orleans to enter the workforce ready to compete, whether it's direct to work, for further education, or both. For example, apprenticeships, earn and learn, tuition reimbursement programs, which are becoming more and more common in our career pathways. 700 in-school youth from 24 New Orleans public schools are enrolled across the programs for half-day training in all of the careers on your screen. Healthcare and building trades are our biggest pathways and the highest growth opportunities and wage earning opportunities in our region that provide an opportunity for many, many young people to matriculate to jobs that are mid-skill jobs that require less than a sort of 4-year college degree and more than a high school diploma. We're also working on growing apprenticeships in these pathways and also provide 100 post-high school sort of opportunity youth, as they're called, in our programs. And our sole purpose is changing outcomes for young people of New Orleans, particularly ensuring that they're well prepared, that they are ready to compete in satisfying, sustaining careers that have an articulated path to advancement to family-sustaining wages. So we were founded in 2017 in response to the economic opportunities in New Orleans and the opportunity for New Orleans public school graduates to gain awareness and access to advanced technical training for these jobs. And at the same time, 10 years post-levies breaking, the family and student desire to access career and technical training, and the question of how our education ecosystem was going to respond to that at scale. At the same time, 10 years post-Katrina, we had smaller schools and we were undergoing unification of state and district under one umbrella of authorization under NOLA PS, which is our district. And so let's go ahead to the next slide, which is really outlining the student experience here. So a group of 21 collaborators from industry, state and local government, education, nonprofit. I was principal at the table. Kate was leading as the founder of Youth Force NOLA, and we came together and we were convened by the Recovery School District and Youth Force NOLA to determine the best structure to create this opportunity for all students, sort of equitable access, but also at scale. So hubbing opportunities is really what we were trying to do. And we landed on a unique nonprofit model, but with a more traditional structure of a half-day career and technical training program, but really, really in response to industry. Our vision, well, our success is measured by how many students can access the training, how many are earning their industry valued Louisiana Workforce Commission validated credentials, which is 93% last year for all of our students, and the connection rate of our graduates. And we, this is about young people and having informed choice. And so we're talking about, how many of them had a correct connection rate for graduates post-graduation right away, whether that's the full-time career, further education, or both. And finally, I would say we talked a little bit about funding, and I think our funding formula is unique. Our facility, which is a state-of-the-art 144,000 square foot renovated New Orleans public school building, was the last FEMA project with the dollars in New Orleans from the storm, a building to serve all students. And we're the operator of that building and filled the building with equipment. So we were founded on philanthropy, and we really use philanthropic dollars to launch new programs and scale. So early staffing, planning, industry alignment, there's a lot of work to designing quality career pathways, and I know we'll get to that, but there's also a school match. So given that a young person comes to the Career Center and has all these experiences for 1 to 2 years every day of half-day training, there's a per pupil match from the school. And then finally, there's state and federal investments. So federal ARPA was funded things like a state-of-the-art welding lab to expand that programming. And the State Capital Outlay Fund also provides furniture and equipment, which is something that all states have. So that's a quick overview. Thanks.
Claire, thank you. Kate, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. And just echoing a gratitude to be here today, and just gratitude to New Orleans. I had dinner last night with my cousin and his best friend who worked in radio when Katrina hit, and so last night was sort of the anniversary dinner of their pre-Katrina dinner. So lots of stories, and just sort of what a time. And so much leadership and strength came to New Orleans from that. And, I think Youth Force we don't consider ourselves a post-Katrina reform, but rather a 10-year post-Katrina, what comes next in delivering promise and potential with our young people. So excited to just share a little bit about that. So as you see here, Youth Force exists so that our young people can fulfill their potential in work and life. We do that onto the next slide. By sort of what our part, sometimes we talk about our work, it's like a little bit like the Intel inside. Our job is to bring out the best in everyone, really all those in the ecosystem who are supporting our young people on their path to career. What does that actually mean? Gets us to the next slide. And Youth Force does 3 major things, all in service of those young people already all the way on the right side, becoming future-ready public school graduates. So first major category of work that Youth Force NOLA does is energizing funding and connecting to provide career-connected learning. There in the middle, you see what do we mean by career-connected learning. We've got 6 major items on our career-connected learning checklist. I'll come back to that in just a second. But a lot of our work is behind the scenes, again, bringing out the best in everyone so that our young people experience career-connected learning. Second is we conduct advocacy for policies and systems that enable career-connected learning. So this is local, state, and federal advocacy work, both policy change and resource work to support partners like Uncommon Construction and like New Orleans Career Center. And then third is evidence-based coaching for the strong implementation of career-connected learning. So this is done locally, and then we also have the opportunity to support folks across the state and other regions in the country where where it makes sense. On the career-connected learning front, then I know we're going to spend a lot of time on this conversation. As the intermediary for this ecosystem. We do also sort of click through and do particular support on soft skills. And we'll hopefully get to talk a bit more about that today. And we also do a special work on internships. So, in the land of 25 public high schools and 200 businesses that are all relatively small, we centrally run a paid internship program for rising high school seniors on behalf of all those partners in the summer. And then during the school year, we support our school partners. We're coaching our school partners to run their own internships in the school year. So ready to sort of talk about any and all of this. Wanted to sort of tie some of this together with this next slide quickly, to sort of what do we mean? How does this all tie together? And we've got lots of slides with these types of stories, but here's Cameron. Cameron attended Edna Carr High School, one of our largest public high schools here in New Orleans, over the river in Algiers. As you see, Cameron wants to be a nurse. Through high school, she enrolled at New Orleans Career Center on their pre-nursing pathway, earning credentials in CPR, patient care, life support. She has moved on even beyond that. Through Youth Force NOLA, she then did an internship in the medical lab at Ochsner Health, which is our state's largest employer, our largest health system. And then, continued to, when it moved on to then enroll in a pre-nursing program as a college student. So just sort of tying the pieces together, we have another slide like this that could tell a story of a young person who did an uncommon construction apprenticeship. Again, how can we make school relevant in service of our young people, developing the plans, the confidence, and the connections so they connect and stay connected post high school and on to amazing careers. Excited to be here today.
Great, thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing screen. One of the first questions I'd love to ask is, we are in this interesting time where there's a lot of polarization around pursuing conventional higher education and pathways versus new innovative pathways. And so much of it seems to be reductionist to it's either or versus both and. I'd love to hear how you all help the young people of New Orleans navigate that.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Sure.
So first of all, I think there are emerging economies, which are something to watch, right? Because when young people want to go direct to work and those programs and articulated pathways aren't there, it's something to watch. So we all watch the evolution of sustainable industries, the impact that has on building trades and energy. But that work then translates into very deliberate work with employers and regional economic development around ensuring that young people understand. At first, we called it a pathway, and then we called it a web, and now we call it a lattice, because there are so many opportunities to pursue within a field. So at the Career Center, there's a starting place, but there's a set of opportunities around that industry. And the goal is for young people to make that choice, an informed choice based on education that's aligned to that, and an understanding through career speakers, industry exposure, conversation, as well as direct training to understand, where their affinity is for that and what brings out their curiosity.
Yeah, I'll say, I'll kind of build on that. Like, we have been described back to ourselves as kind of like a liberal arts college for the trades. We live at Uncommon in building awareness and exposure through exploratory, rigorous experience immersed in this environment, right? Our vision, hovering above our mission, right, is a world in which young people have access to a meaningful and rewarding work life of their choosing, right? The notion being that we spend a lot of time at work, and so we should find, our own versions of self-actualization within that or whatever, and that all young people deserve to be able to make that choice. We actually we have choice as a designated benchmark within the progression of our program, where the young person is choosing and electing, I am this pathway, that pathway, that pathway. And that's part of our case management coaching with our youth. So because we're a little smaller, we're a little more nimble and fluid, we're really able to be like responsive to the young person's interests. And if they give us a morsel of a curiosity, then we can really lean into that. We're about 50-50 college versus workforce, or continuing education versus workforce, amongst our graduates, I guess, and our about 50% of our applicants identify as being industry bound in some way, but about 75 to 80% of our graduates. So there is a conversion, right? The best way for us to get young people into these much needed jobs in our community is to give them exposure and awareness and contact with versions of themselves and their peers and opportunities that exist. But we're not prescriptive. Our industry partnerships don't involve quotas. We don't say we will produce 10 electricians if you donate this much money. And we're very clear and honest and transparent, and some people might say stubborn, on that front. And a lot of that is really like prioritizing the young person's agency and their right of self-determination through the acquisition of skills and experience and a network and resources. So we try and adhere to that and present young people with sometimes too many options to think about where they might go. And then once they give us that little morsel of curiosity, we can drill down a little closer to where they end up.
Yeah, I just want to add one sort of at the educator and school leader perspective on this is, and I think from our founding of Youth Force, right? Like when we first started talking to school leaders, like you should do career connected learning. They were like, no. All of our kids are going to college, leave me alone. And I wish we had actually one data point I wish we'd gathered in 2015 when we were founding Youth Force was what % of classrooms in New Orleans are named after colleges? Because I would say now, as you tour our K-8s and our high schools, I'm seeing classrooms named after notable New Orleanians. I'm seeing classrooms named after industry professions. And college, of course, should still be celebrated and socialized. And it's being much less sold as like your life's destination. And so with that, part of the conversation we've brought to education leaders and school leaders, is just sort of insights from young people, and especially our alumni, who have said to us, you told me college was my life's work. I got there. I changed majors 5 times. I lost my Pell Grant, or I didn't have the skills to hold down a job to buy pizza and books. And the stories keep going, right? So bringing that perspective and those stories, those very true realities of our young people to our educator partners, paired with the realities and the labor needs of the regional workforce, really enables this conversation to say both like, your college kids need career insights, and your college kids also know that the correct answer to get you to leave them alone is to say that they're going to college. And so we need to talk about career so that education has more purpose and education has more value to our young people. And this is what they want, right? And so to sort of keep the conversation going.
Kate, I'd love to stick on that for a little more and hear how you all work within and with K-12 systems. And I am curious, obviously, I'd love to see what you do work in every community, irrespective of who is running a school. And you do happen to work in a charter district, which is fairly unique in this country. So I'd love to hear how you partner with K-12, and if you think there's any element of the fact that they happen to be charters that makes a difference or not.
Yeah, I think so the way we work with K-12 is we say, your job and your current construct is rigorous academics, amazing school cultures, incredible different elements. The majority of the educators in your building studied education, or if they were an alternative pathway person like me, political science, or Spanish, right? So what we're going to do, right, we're going to help you layer these pieces, this career awareness, the career exploration, partnerships with organizations like Uncommon and New Orleans Career Center, so that your young people get access to career. So I would categorize our work into both sort of hearts and minds work, the telling the stories of alumni, telling stories of regional opportunity, capacity building work. How do you schedule this? What are the it is like technocratic perfection, right? It is master schedules and course coding and, federal funding and state resources. And then it is partnership brokering. So how do we help folks come together? And then the fourth thing is that sort of evidence-based coaching. We do a lot of work on how do you integrate soft skills into the way you do school? How do you that higher ability core that Erin talked about? How could you actually reinforce and teach those skills in English 2 and Bio 1 and whatever else? So the fact that all of our high school partners are charter schools, it's actually it's not what we wake up thinking about. What I would say is I think we moved faster in the New Orleans ecosystem in getting career connected learning to scale than we probably would have in a traditional district, because our educators are so close to decision making, and so they can turn things around quite quickly. I think the flip side would be we don't have the sort of top-down imposition power. And with that, once our educators grab on to this is imperative for our young people's success and readiness, we see them move quite quickly. And so in many ways, I would say the charter ecosystem is an advantage. And it is a reality that we're constantly navigating. So there, upsides and downsides, but the upsides definitely outweigh the downsides. Claire or Erin, I don't know what else you would add to that.
I would, it's interesting you gave that anecdote of, the quickest way for a high school junior or senior to get you off their back is to say, I want to go to college, right? I think for better or worse, a bellwether here of like what, not to use that pun, but of like whether, how saturated career connected learning and non-college pathways have become in the New Orleans ecosystem is that I'm also seeing that in the trades and in direct to workforce. An anecdote here of a student that we share with the Career Center. He came to us and we said, what do you want to be when you graduate? He said, I want to be a welder. We started probing a couple questions and learned no one had ever shown him a picture of a welder. He didn't know what a welder wore to work, that they used a torch, that they connected two pieces of metal by melting metal between them. Like, didn't know that. And so that really is like where we're starting. And I do think some of it comes from educator exposure and awareness, right? Like educators don't know what it takes to be in a profession that's not an educator, right? So there was even like at the beginning of Youth Force and Uncommon 10 or so years ago, this World of Work initiative, if you remember that, Kate and Claire, that was like getting educators exposure to other job and career progressions that they didn't have because, maybe they were just, went straight into their own profession. They don't know what it takes to be an engineer, but it sounds like a nice thing to tell a young person they should go be if they're good at math, right? And so there's a holistic community-wide education of career pathways that I think is needed. And so I think there's a few other things. I'll also double click on like, we have relationships mostly directly with individual schools. We have a couple charter management networks that we have relationships with where we enroll students from multiple campuses within the same CMO. But we also enroll a homeschool population at Uncommon. I know we're here to talk about New Orleans, but a few years ago, we initiated expansion to a new city, another location. And that city, Minneapolis, is a mix of district run and charter schools. And so for us, what matters is that we're close to decision makers. So I think echoing Kate, like the decision-making landscape where choice is possible at the school level and decisions are possible at the school level has been helpful for our organization and the schools to find, especially in those early years when it really was like college as the sole key lever to break the cycle of poverty. And if we tell you you don't have to go to college, then we are selling you short, right? It was really helpful to suss out cultural and mission alignment within that aspect of the conversation of what was happening here.
It's helpful. And oh, Claire, sorry.
Very quickly, I would just add, for those who may not know, our charter schools are our public schools. And so while some are, there is more complexity elsewhere, they are. And so the Career Center knows that in order for this to work for schools, we are like, just get them to the curb and we'll take it from there. Like the transportation, the logistics, the scheduling, the credit, we try to package everything up for them with the goal of making it easier for them to have this kind of partnership, which means that there's a lot of conversations, phone calls, and problem solving as well. But the goal is to meet the schools to provide something that they then can focus on these other things, because there are so many things that educators have to focus on.
That's great. And that actually, I think, is a segue to another critical stakeholder, which is talking about employers. And I think one of the things that we've observed is that sometimes in the education and the nonprofit space, employers are almost treated like a bit of a necessary evil. However, I think our experience in research and working with clients is that for something to scale in workforce, it actually has got to work for employers. Altruism doesn't scale. And so it's been great to hear how you partner with K-12. I'd be interested to hear, like, how do you approach that with employers?
Okay.
Gator Claire.
Well, I think, first of all of us rely on industry advice and alignment, right? Like, it is a constant feedback loop. And so we have advisory councils. It's a best practice, right? You have a group of people who really contribute to and have ongoing discussions about how to provide real experiences that are aligned to workplace expectations. I mean, an industry weighed in on the renovation of our facility, and one of the things they were very clear about is, like, you can't have an indoor experience here for the trades. Like, it must be authentic to the reality of New Orleans, which is heat and weather and all of these things. So we have a collaborative courtyard with a roof, and it's open, but like everything from the design of spaces to the equipment. And when you're in a give and take relationship where you're thinking about what industry needs, then they often come to the table with resources. So tools, extra equipment like conduit from work sites, welding rods, like healthcare experiences, ensuring that young people have an opportunity to get out there and see these workspaces, to consider what it really is like to be a civil engineer or a structural engineer working on the Superdome project, right? Like, these are essential relationships and are really about an exchange of information that supports the community. But I think it's also, it is about materials, it's about knowledge first and foremost, and being able to keep up, right? When you take an instructor out of the field, you've also got to continue their education. And so that's a really great way that we do that.
Great.
I think one of our like superpowers, and the Career Center does a phenomenal job of like articulated pathways with these employers and having ways for them to engage and intersect. And it's really across a lot of different sectors. It's really something cool. Kudos, Claire and team. I think one of our superpowers at Uncommon in terms of like the employer partnership and employer stakeholders is we are an employer. So like we are putting our money where our mouth is. We are hiring these young people. And so if we're recommending a young person for a job, it's kind of like a version of a net promoter score, right? Like we're nominating our products, our young people to go work for these other employers. And I think that helps our trust relationship with our industry partners. We're sort of walking that walk that they are. We are operating job sites. We are working in safety sensitive. We're transacting real estate. We're doing work for clients. We're doing a lot of the things, albeit at a potentially smaller scale than some of these industry partners. But that's really helped us, sort of be seen as not a secondary or tertiary space from employers or schools, but really as being like, no, we are you, you are us. And so there's an empathy and trust that's there, that we really try not to take for granted. And then along the way with those industry partners, we try and have these meaningful intersections with those partners. So chances for shared experiences, empathy building opportunities between industry and employer partners and young people in our programs, and that aren't just apply for a job and have an interview, or aren't just, we have a career fair, we have a job fair, but we try and also bring it to life in spaces where there's an exchange between young people on a more level playing field. So they come to our turf, we go to their turf, in that way, kind of programmatically outside of just operating in similar ways that they do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would sort of want to, like, having observed Uncommon Construction and New Orleans Career Center, and Youth Force works with a couple of other training provider partners, and many other folks in the space. I think I sort of echo to you, Alex, that it can happen that sort of employers and regional businesses are seen as a necessary evil. And I think the sort of, and I think what Uncommon and New Orleans Career Center do, and some of our partners, is, so there's just a self-awareness. Like, I myself am an employer, right? Like, I myself would never choose to fill my business exclusively with people who are new to the career and are only partially skilled. Right. And so that's part of the sort of conversation with our educator partners is like, would you run a school entirely staffed by first year teachers or student teachers? Absolutely not. And so, I think, love that Aaron said there's like an empathy, right? Like, there is an empathy and an understanding of the complexity of running a business. And unlike all of us, most people have not started a business to host 17-year-olds in their workplace. And so it is our job to then help the 17-year-olds shine and show up in the best way and, be supported through that. And so the only other thing I would add, one thing that I have seen that I think is really powerful is, especially, as the Career Center, for example, added rapid reskill programming during the pandemic. They went from a year-long training to a 6-week training. Claire, you could fill in the details, but what I then saw was they were getting immediate and sort of much faster employer feedback about what was working and wasn't working, so that then they could turn around in the next cohort, improve the training program and the curricula. And in Youth Force, we get lots of employer feedback about internships, so that next year's cohort is better trained. I'm sure. I mean, we're hearing Aaron say that, and Uncommon also, right? So, being very clear to employer partners and business partners, we're doing this for you, right? So we need you to tell us what's working and what's not working. And this is both sort of ratings in terms of soft skills of their hires and their, seasonal youth employees. And, I think the biggest is, are they staying hired? How long are they staying hired? Where they're getting full-time roles?
Great.
And I think there's a component of that, sorry, just to tag on to what Kate said, there's a component of that, like, are they staying hired? That also involves, like, we can support them for so long, and it is also on you to keep them. We also understand sometimes you need to get fired. And at least in our industry, people move from company to company, and that's a big theme in this industry. A thing I often say with industry and employer partners is, like, I don't have the same job I had when I was 18 years old. And more often than not, neither do they. And they kind of move from company to company. And so there are elements of that where, like, there is no panacea. Sometimes we have a tendency to be like, fixate in the same way we did with college. Like, if I can just get them to college, then they'll be good. If I can just get them to a job, then they'll be good. There's a lot more nuance to it, and a lot of times decision making and the cliff can be much closer and obscured along the way. So we just try and have that open conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask one more question, and I want to open it up to the audience. And Courtney, we will start with your question after this next one. But you guys in the beginning mentioned a lot around skills. And so, after AI, skills is like one of the most like hot topics right now. And, LinkedIn reported in 2023, 380 million skills were added to LinkedIn profiles. And it feels like there's a lot of marketing around skills. And I think our concern is there's very little in the way of functioning skills marketplaces where people can say, I went and did this thing, here are the skills I developed in a way that is credible to a prospective employer. And yet, as I've taken my journey of learning about the work you all are doing, it feels like there's a lot of really exciting stuff about how you are building effective skills marketplaces where you very clearly have a common language on skills. You have clarity on what you're doing to build them, and you have clarity on how you are assessing and demonstrating them in a way that creates value for employers and individuals in this sort of marketplace. And so I'd love to hear a little more about how you all do this, advice you have for others.
Well, I'll take a shot, but I'm going to position Kate as a leader here. 10 plus years ago, those of us who are getting started in this like ecosystem that swirls around Youth Force and others created like the New Orleans Youth Provider Soft Skills Lexicon Project or something like that, where we were like trying to figure out what were the words that we were all going to agree to describe these non-technical things. If we take for granted that there are technical curricula, right, that we could adopt or adapt. But you also look at the research and look at these durable skills, 21st century soft skills. Even just in that, people have different ways of referring to those clusters of skills. And we had a lot of like bang your head on the wall, brainstorming synonyms meetings where we were just writing them on a whiteboard. And then I think Kate and a couple of other folks went to conference, or you went to Chicago for some reason, and you came back with this amazing framework that has found its way to the center of a lot of our work. And certainly at Uncommon, we were at an inflection point deciding, okay, we're going to let others do the industry recognized credentials, right? We're going to let the community colleges, the trade schools, the career center, we're going to let them do that. How do we do a transformational job site experience, a work-based learning experience? And this framework from MHA Labs just kind of landed on us. So we went all in on that. And I think one of my biggest takeaways from that experience is we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. And sometimes it's as simple as incorporating the right language, right? Or having a visual that you can refer to. And getting some common agreements that like, yes, this is our preferred framework. And how can we find alignment? So your environment feels like your environment and your environment feels like your environment, but there is a common thread so that when we do share students, we're using similar vernacular around teamwork ethic and problem solving. The badges that I showed you, those are the same 4 badges. We just added a construction brand to it and sort of made it work for our environment. And I would say, Kate and the Youth Force NOLA community, both for practitioners and providers like us, as well as the soft skills work that they do with teachers and educators in the schools, have really done a lot to saturate the landscape with this framework that is easy to digest, right? That's like youth facing, not overly complicated, not lecturing, that's accessible for young people, and so on. So I think that it just happened at the right time. There was really a serendipity around it. It just like really happened at the right time for a lot of us to just like say like, yeah, we're all in on that. Great. But I'm with you too, Alex. Like there are however many credentials providers. I get an email pitch in my inbox every other week for how we can adopt a new thing. One of the things that sold me most on MHA Labs is certainly at the time it was free. And so there wasn't an ulterior motive, right? Of the like cottage industry of credentialing. And so, we've just kind of grown the system within that and with a lot of alignment in a lot of different spaces here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Erin, thank you for teeing it up so well in the soft skills work. I mean, I think core on all of this, of course, is we want our young people to name, claim, and own their skills. And we want them to be empowered and recognized for all of these incredible skills they have. So one of the things I love about the work we do and really sort of building on this skills marketplace, right, is as we go into our high schools, we're helping diversify how young people are celebrated and recognized, and our young people's building their sense of self and their identity. So, you can see in high schools, and we have a lot more work to do on this, but young people are, we're moving from young people being celebrated as prime athletes and, honor roll, to add in young people being celebrated for future nurses and future welders and, future project managers and all of these career identities. And they're getting recognized as incredible problem solvers and communicators and collaborators and all of those dimensions. And a part of what's awesome about that is young people who are really sort of very traditionally not recognized. I have a great story about a young man with autism who did our internship, right? Who the way his incredible brain works meant that he was the best intern at planning for success. And his calendar was blown out and scheduled down to the minute in a way that no other 17-year-old in that internship program could do. And he was teaching his peers how to plan travel time and how to use the public bus app and all these different dimensions, right? And so anyway, we could do a whole webinar on soft skills. Sign me up. But I think it's what sort of where Youth Force really pushes is for us to all be transparent and clear and really extract from employers what are the skills you're looking for. How can we make their terms not, sort of industry specific or business specific? Because we need educators to understand this. We need young people to be empowered through this. And we need it to be transferable. And so that's where our soft skills lexicon and all the things we do that, to Erin's point, they're open source. And, we've got an assessment platform, we've got resources and tools, and then we really defer to our partners at the Career Center and others around the industry credentials, which are the ones that industry says really matter the most, and how do we make sure that they're being taught with excellence. So, but again, like clarity, simplicity, I agree with Erin on that.
And if I made just a plug, we've seen organizations in other parts of the country, rather than trying to reinvent their own skills framework, take the framework that Youth Force NOLA and MHA has developed and adapt it. So they're not starting from scratch, but starting from something well researched. I want to make sure we have time to get to at least the one question from the audience. And so we have a question about early care and child care. And, as the person in the chat said, it's the workforce behind the workforce. And people can't work without childcare. And this is an endemic problem across the country right now. How have you guys thought about it within the New Orleans context?
I can start. So we have put a lot of thought to it, and I don't know, maybe this is a very New Orleans answer, but we have a lead intermediary for early childhood for our city and our region. So Agenda for Children, terrific partner. They take the lead on managing state and federal dollars for early childhood, organizing capacity building. So a lot of the type of work Youth Force does, in advocacy and evidence-based coaching, our partners at Agenda for Children do in the early childhood space. So we then did, actually about a year and a half ago, a really fun project between Youth Force and Agenda, which was what are the pathways into early childhood, and what do we need to do for, what would need to happen for more of our high school students to understand it. Long answer short, the truth is that the early childhood pathways are ones where the quantity of hours and the dosage and the way the requirements are constructed, it really does not mesh with a high school schedule. And so except for a couple of our high schools that have very alternative models, it's really not accessible for a young person while also pursuing a high school diploma. And with that, certainly we know our young people, we believe at Youth Force, a lot of our job is to help build our young people's awareness and access to those jobs and pathways that they otherwise don't see. Early childhood is fortunately one they do really get to see. So this is one where, sort of we do very nominal sort of building our young people's exposure to this, and making sure our high school partners then know where young people could be referred. So then in a post-high school opportunity, if that's the pathway they want to take, they could go there. And Agenda for Children then leads on supporting those training programs and pathway programs.
I'll just build on that real quick that, I think this is also an issue that is the result and product of some systemic inequities in our industry. I spoke to, or we often speak to the gender disparity on job sites and in construction companies. And jobs that exist on job sites are typically hourly employees not eligible for the same kind of fringe benefits like parental leave or childcare support. So as we're thinking about this non-virtuous cycle of one thing enabling another and who is seeking what jobs and where and when, those are calculated decisions that people are making. So both to Kate's point, like even within our program, we have young people who become parents before they graduate high school. And so there's, how do I simultaneously be a new parent and a high school student and a participant in a training program? That's a challenging thing for a 16, 17-year-old to be navigating. And then once you graduate from high school, that, maybe you're a sibling caring for another sibling while your parents are working and you have home life responsibilities. But then as you enter into this workforce, it can be pretty unforgiving and unaccommodating. We've seen a lot of our construction partners, the two that come to mind are the ones that have women in positions of leadership as their CEOs, Landis Construction and Gibbs Construction, that are adapting their, have become aware of their own blind spots and have adapted some of the roles and the structures of those roles to be more accommodating for folks, so that an amazing woman carpenter doesn't have to work themselves into an office position just to become a mom. And so there's a lot of other stuff like that. Claire.
I know we're limited on time, so I'll just say, if you haven't looked at statistics around occupational segregation, folks, you should. Early child care workers, CNAs, don't meet the wage band for the career sort of credential framework. And that's unfortunate. And we're really frank with folks about that. As if you want us to support in this training and lean into this, you would have to pay people better. And to Kate's point, there are a whole bunch of folks who are doing that work. And so part of what we do also is scan that landscape. But we don't just train in CNA, for example, and we don't train cooks because, we train chefs. And we want to make sure that people are moving into those very particular wages if they're going to spend a half day of their high school career to at least make a living wage and above and have a clear articulated path to advancement.
Great, thank you. We're almost at time, but we have one more question. Maybe we can do a quick whip around from Beth's question around how do you work within the schools to make sure that what they're teaching within their curriculum really dovetails well with what you're providing around skills building, experiential learning. And one last thing to sneak in, because I know you all want to talk about social capital. If you want to talk about social capital while you're answering that, we can get a twofer.
Yeah, and I did just answer Beth a little bit. I mean, I think there is not a lot of explicit, like, let's do science for healthcare pathways yet, except for where we have partner schools that are doing Project Lead the Way. There's a lot of guidance I know that the Career Center offers to schools about the prereqs so that young people can excel at the Career Center. Youth Force's main focus is about soft skills integration in those math, science, and other classes. We also host an educator externship program so those math and science teachers can go experience industry and bring it back. But there's not, Claire, unless I'm forgetting something, like, I don't think we do a lot of explicit, like, how do you do science for construction trades? Do we? Am I forgetting something?
No, we do it ourselves, actually. And I think that, like, every pathway at the Career Center does decimals, fractions, and conversions all the time. It's just like part of the industry, right? And so we offer the credits, for example, anatomy and physiology through the lens of healthcare for schools, because taking half day for 2 years means filling some of those core requirements too. So that's really our strategy. But we do talk a lot and provide guidance where people are really trying to deliberately plan.
Yeah, I think our lens here is, like I think surveys across the country that I've seen is, we believe that high schools or schools, K-12 schools, first and foremost, should be high quality, exceptional first instruction. Schools' primary objective here, right, is like teach kids reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then what we can do is put those core foundational skills in context. There's only so much that we can backfill. Um, but we try and do things where we have visual instructional plans. All our tape measures have the fractions written on them. We love drawing Pythagorean theorem on the job site somewhere and pulling 2 tape measures to find a right angle, like drawing an arc on the roof whenever we're up there on the ground to find our 6, 8, 10. There's a lot. There is an overwhelming abundance of content that we can spontaneously shine a light on. And we also, again, also try and be honest with our employers. If a young person comes in with some of those foundational challenges, they may not graduate from Uncommon having mastered the tape measure. That might still be a thing that they're working through in their first years on the job. And so, we also try and be clear about where we can and can't move the needle, and really prioritizing. That's one reason in New Orleans we operate after school and weekends, so that we are not taking away from that good primary first instruction. We think high school students should be going to school and getting that first instruction, and then we can hang an exponent on it in our time with them.
Great. We are amazingly at time. So I want to, again, just deep thanks to our panelists, Claire, Kate, Aaron, for joining us, for also what you're doing. I know we have lots of resources in the chat and emails. People should not be bashful about reaching out and stalking. Kudos to the person who made a donation during this call. That's pretty awesome. And thank you again for spending time with us today to the audience. And this will be recorded. It has been recorded. It will be shared within the next week for people to share with others. So I hope everyone has a good rest of day.